Good evening, Guyana. Good evening to our viewers. So I'm Ronald J. Daniels, and this evening I am standing in the gap for our spirited host, Miss Coretta McDonald. So Miss Coretta is unavailable this evening, and we are going to be advancing the cause this evening. So we're going to have a really dynamic show for you this evening. So we want to welcome all of our viewers. We want to thank you for your usual support, and we're thanking you for locking in to our spirited discussion this evening. So tonight, we would be looking at three interconnected social issues. We'll be looking at domestic violence, gender-based violence. We'll be looking at bullying in schools, and we would be looking at the tragedy of school dropouts. So we're moving beyond the statistics this evening. We're moving beyond the laws, and we are going behind these social issues. And we have an amazing and powerful panel for you this evening. We have Mr. Darwin Joseph, who is an educator. Mr. Joseph is also a minister in the Full Gospel Fellowship under the leadership of Apostle Kwame Wilson. Mr. Joseph is a husband. He's a father of four beautiful girls. He holds a bachelor's degree in social sciences with specialization in accounting, and he also holds a master's degree in business administration. Also, we have in our studio this evening, we have Keanse Daniels, who is also one of the young Christian ministers under the leadership of Apostle Kwame Wilson. Kay holds an associate's degree in business. She holds a bachelor's of law degree from the University of the West Indies, and she also holds a postgraduate diploma in tourism and hospitality. So we want to welcome both Mr. Joseph and Mrs. Daniels to our discussion this evening. Mr. Joseph, welcome. How are you this evening?
Good evening, folks. I'm okay. I'm good. I've had a good day. Um, I've had a good day at work. I've had a good day at the office, and I am quite prepared to join you, my brother. First, I call you my spiritual brother. In having these discussions, as I would have mentioned to you earlier, I am quite invested in these topics as I have daughters, you know, some at school age and some are adults. So where gender-based violence and where bullying in school and so forth is concerned, I am very passionate about those things. To see that the youths you know, uh, grow up, live to their full potential. You know. So, but I am good and I'm happy to be on with you, my brother,
We
and your
are
beautiful wife.
happy and delight. We are happy and delighted to have you. Just let me know whether you're comfortable us referring to you on a first name basis, or you prefer first to refer to you as Mr. Joseph.
My brother, you don't have to be formal with me. Uh, we
Fantastic.
are very familiar with each other, you know. So yeah, Darwin would be
I'm
fine.
happy to I'm happy to have that liberty. What I did not say about the lovely Keansi Daniels, affectionately referred to as Kia Daniels, is that she's a wife and she's a mother as well. She's a mother of three very energetic boys. Kay, is very good to have you with us. I'm taking the liberty to refer to you as Kay. How are you this evening?
Hi, good evening, Mr. Daniels. I am doing quite well. Thank you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. It's quite interesting to hear my wife refer to me as Mr. Daniels. Yeah, so we can drop the formalities and you can call me as you normally call me, Ronald, Ron.
Will do, will do. I'll do that.
How are you feeling about our discussion this evening about the topics that we are going to dive into?
Well, I'm really looking forward to lending my voice to the conversation. It's not the most pleasant topic that we have to discuss, in fact, but it is a reality that we have to deal with. And so um, we're here to find solutions. We are here to, give our opinions. And I believe that we are entitled to. So I'm here for that.
Ah, fantastic. Thank you ever so much. So I was reviewing the statistics on gender-based violence, which is really a scourge in our society. And this falls under the broader banner of domestic violence. I was looking at the statistics from 2020 all the way up to 2025, and we've had 127 cases, reported cases of persons being killed in domestic violence situations over those years. What is even more alarming is that 96 of those 127 persons were women. And these statistics take us up to October of 2025. From 2020 to October of 2025, we haven't even accounted for the instances uh, in November, December, and of course, all the way up to March, in which we are. Now, I want to put the caveat out there. I'm minded that this is a program that is hosted regularly hosted by Miss McDonald, who is a member of Parliament under the Partnership for National Unity banner. But we're happy to have non-political voices in this discourse. And I know that both Darwin and Kay would be contributing that non-political voice. I have the I have the luxury of being a bit controversial if necessary, because I too represent the Partnership for National Unity in this discussion. Right, so the government has responded to the scourge of gender-based violence and domestic violence as a whole by instituting what is considered to be the Revolutionary Family Violence Act. And some of the key provisions in that act allow the police to, where there's suspected cases of domestic violence, allow the police to enter those homes without a warrant. Ordinarily, the police would need a warrant to enter any home or any premises. It also ensures that perpetrators are charged within 48 hours, sorry. And there's also the provision to ensure that the perpetrators leave the home and the victim gets to stay in the home. So that offers a measure of protection, but we still have these alarming statistics. Also, the government has these hope and justice centers, which are considered to be the one-stop shops, offering survivor-oriented services like medical services, legal services, and counseling. There's also the 24/7 914 hotline, which offers that response to persons who reach out to the hotline. And the government has also trained community-based advocates. As a matter of fact, the government has trained, um, my research disclosed 1,200 persons for early intervention. And there are, of course, shelters and financial aid services and so. But despite all of these things that are in place, we have the vice president who has accepted that gender based violence is still very, very, and I dare emphasize, very, very prevalent in our society. And the minister, Dr. Vinay Prasad, the minister of social protection, she has acknowledged that despite these systems, that the root cause is deeply personal. So, what I want to get your input on is that though we have all of these systems in place, right, which seem to be tailored towards a crisis response, how do we move beyond that crisis response? Darwin.
All right. I was waiting for the prompt. Now, uh, all of these uh, interventions, or so to speak, are very necessary, but we are not tackling the root cause of gender based violence. Um, we are not keeping an eye on the most vulnerable in our society where that is concerned. And I'll go way back to almost 30 years ago when I was at uh, secondary school. Of course, back then we did one SBA. If you're old enough, Ronald and Kay, back then we did one SBA, and that was for
I
social
have,
studies.
I do have some grace, so I might be old enough.
Yes. So back then, my topic was domestic violence because it was prevalent back then, and it's still prevalent now, even with all of the more information, more cameras out there, more, yeah, the information age has blown up, but it is still prevalent today as it was back in those days. And it is inbred in us, so to speak. And that's why it's such a scourge. Um, Endemic is the word they use to describe it. Uh, and we're not seeing any letting up in it because the root cause of that, or most of it, is other social ills. Number one among them is poverty. Number one among them is poverty. And unless we as a society can address that, address it, address the problem at the root rather than, on the branches, or when it's grown out of proportion, we need to be socialized a bit. We need to be socialized differently from a tender age. I mean, men and boys are the main perpetrators of gender-based violence, but there is also um, females who are guilty of aggressive behavior. So, but poverty remains the main um, at the root of domestic violence, whether it be violence towards women, whether it be child abuse, so to speak. Uh, until we can address the root social ill, we will continue to um, have social systems that address address the matter in a reactionary way rather than a proactive way. Right? So I'm thinking that we really need to. We've got lofty Millennium Development Goals in terms of tackling poverty, um, and as a country, as a society, we have more finances available so that we can do more socially for our people, our human resources. We need to pay attention to um, mental health. We're nowhere on that. And that is a very big thing. Once we don't tackle that, most of us would have grown with some kind of form of trauma that we haven't addressed. And we grow into adults and we're expected to function as adults and so forth. Um, People are people. We do what we know. We do what we see. We do what would have been normalized to us while we were growing up. So we, with education and so forth, we can see that it's wrong. But our default setting is what we know, what we would have grown up and seen as normal. And that caused us to repeat these cycles of abusive and aggressive behavior. And when you're in a corner, who's closest to you when you lash out? Those are the persons you lash out at, which in the person they're the persons you're supposed to be protecting the most. I hope you guys can hear me because somehow the feedback here, uh, yes, has gone. Yeah,
We hear you
so
clearly.
those are some of my insights on that. We need to tackle the problems at the root, and I think a big cause of most of the other social problems, including domestic violence, um, based on my research, is poverty. And we need to find a way to lift our people out of these cycles.
Those are really, really powerful observations and contributions, Darwin. And I am with you on that. The responses are typically reactionary as against a proactive response. And as you have quite eloquently said, invariably we do not get to the root causes of these issues. Now, I work in the criminal justice system as an attorney, and I have occasion to deal with, way too many of these instances. And invariably somebody is going to be given a protection order in those circumstances, but it's really just a piece of paper
People.
that that is oftentimes disregarded,
Mhm.
right? So yeah, so the response is usually on the back end as against the front end, in spite of all of these systems that we seemingly putting in place.
Mhm.
Now, okay, as I move to you, right, I'll be happy to hear you enlarge those contributions. And also, I'm minded that as far as I'm aware, there's no national strategy, no national comprehensive strategy to deal with the prevention of domestic violence generally and gender based violence. And I'm not aware of there being any comprehensive public education on these matters. I don't know if you're a bit more fortunate than I am to have come across any national strategy response or any sustained public education in this regard.
Ron, I too have not had the
Oh, she
benefit.
calls me Ron.
I too have not had the benefit of information where gender based violence is concerned in terms of a national strategy. And I would have to agree with my brother Darwin in that a lot of times is a social ill that stems from our cultivation, um, from children to teenagers to adulthood. We take what we have been cultured with to our adult stage. And one of the things I have come to realize as a grown up, and I have to admit that it is difficult to shift patterns. It is difficult to change behaviors. And in as much as you may know something is not benefiting you, whether it's your poor eating habits, that you would have grown up with, and that, I should be eating more vegetables and less carbs, because it's going to benefit my health. It is the same with what we have grown up and seen as acceptable in our homes and in our communities where violence is concerned. And it covers all forms of violence, not just male to female, but violence of every kind. And the mental aspect is also really important and something that we have not begun to deal with um, in any way adequately as a nation. And I think that is where we have to press even harder on the mental aspect of it, especially our males. I think I think our men really need to to understand the value of their women. First of all, that they are well. I'm a Christian, and I know that the Bible speaks of us as the weaker sex, in the sense that we deserve the protection of our males. And so um, I believe that men need to be cultured, they need to be cultivated in that appreciation, of the value of their women, and that they need to be the protectors of their women. I think um, if we can somehow get to that stage as a nation. And I don't believe that, this is something that the government can um, infringe upon us or, push on us without our agreement. As a nation, we need to, as a people, we need to understand, just how important this is. And there has to be a partnership between the citizens and the government to combat this. It's not something that, a hotline or even one ministry, the Ministry of Human Services, um, can take on by itself. It needs to be a nationwide awakening, because, like my brother said, this has been happening for as long as we can remember. He recalls 30 years ago he dealt with it, in his SBA. And so we are here 30 years later and we're still dealing with it. And I think the mental aspect is at the core of everything. And that is where we have to press in, because as it is up here, it flows, everything flows from above. So once we can get the mindset shift,
Yeah.
then we can really attack any form of violence.
Thank you ever so much, Kay. Listen, I am so enlivened by these responses. For those of you who have just tuned in, I'm Ronald Daniels. I'm standing at the stead of Miss McDonald this evening as we continue to advance the cause towards that better nation, towards bettering us as a society. We're looking at domestic violence, we're looking at school dropouts, and we're looking at school bullying. These are really layered issues, and from the responses we're getting from our panelists, Darwin and Kay, it testifies to the fact that these issues are really layered and that the solutions are not going to come from one direction. Rather, the solutions are multimodal solutions which we should have societal buy-in to. But I want to dig a little deeper into both of your responses. Now, Darwin, you have spoken about how poverty sits at the heart of these issues, and you've identified the factor. Well, you've referenced the fact that we are in a climate of semen wealth, and I say semen wealth because we're really wealthy on paper, and a lot of that wealth that we see represented on paper is not filtering down into the communities that need it most. And I'm listening to Kay. I'm listening to Kay. Speak about the protection that males ought to offer to the females, and that raises the issue of toxic masculinity. Now, how do we deal with the poverty aspect as the undercurrent of this endemic social ill? And how do we reconcile this positive masculinity to mitigate that scourge? So I'll go with you again, Darren.
Okay. Now, toxic masculinity. Um, I was having a conversation with a brother of mine, Patrick Chan. We came all the way from university days, and we now work in the same organization. Like myself, he's a minister of the gospel. So when we have debates or discussions, it's usually centered around the word and dealing with the ills that we have in society and how best the church or religious groups can intervene in that. Um, it is a privilege to uh, serve men in the community. Um, I myself, having no sons, uh, have four daughters. I like to be able to interact with the young men, with my older brothers and so forth about our role in the society as a whole. And one of the things we need to understand is that a woman, a woman completes us, men. We are not complete without the female. Right? And understanding that, understanding that will tell us that we have our role to play and she has her role to play in our life. I will be the first to admit that I may think something and I may bring it to my wife because we are partners in life. So decisions to be made and so forth. I'm always um, seeking her insight, her input into whether it be major or minor, because we have that kind of relationship. And the angle that she usually comes from, it tells us that we're made up different. We see things differently, but not in a competing manner, but to complement, you know, and to add to what you're thinking. So
You
understanding
know, do,
that,
do
yes.
forgive me, Darren. I'm smiling there, and I'm looking at my wife and I'm smiling because I'm oftentimes admonished,
Mhm.
and I'm given the prescription that thou shalt listen to his wife.
Yeah, we've had that video. We know the video I'm talking about that was shared. Yeah, but I mean, we're not to lean on to our own understanding because um, even some things that seem simple, when you think about it holistically, it's not that simple. And that is where we need our partners' input to to help us in terms of having that holistic view. And if we understand that, then that toxic masculinity that we're talking about here in our consciousness dissipates. It disappears because what she brings, it doesn't take away, it adds. It adds. And that is to say that we're not reliant, but we actually need her input. We actually need our input. And if there's a need for her input, then we don't we don't see her as insignificant, but rather as valuable to our very existence. And Ronald, I've had some conversations with you. Um, I remember when we were on our last men's fellowship outing, and I went back and I tell my wife how Ronald roast me over the coals for what had happened. But we need, and this is what I bring that up to say. We need our women, but we also need our brothers who will be who will be mature enough not to address an issue from uh, a male dominated view of the world and of how things are, but from a point of view that picks at your consciousness when you put yourself in the other person's position. You know, and I guess you're always play the devil's advocate, but it's needed. It's needed to bring us to our senses. I hope you remember what I'm talking about. I hope you remember
You know,
what I'm talking about.
and I'm really happy that
Yes.
you've said that. Because I'm a bit cautious about the term the devil's advocate, as I'm really keen on disassociating myself from the
With the
devil.
devil.
But yeah, yeah. But I'm always really keen on pushing buttons and taking things to their logical limits. I have a natural interrogating mind, and I'm glad that you have referred to that, because I am going to be pushing both your and K's buttons.
Hmm. Not to worry, but nevertheless, coming back to the question, um, and I will go here to to ministry in that the renewing of our minds is so very necessary for us to see things from that perspective, the perspective of truth, and the perspective of fairness and of justice. Um, and if we, irrespective of how we were cultured growing up, when we are mature, when we have attained that adulthood stage of our lives, we need to see things differently. We need to understand that wrong is wrong and right is right. And irrespective of whatever perspective you have, it doesn't change whether wrong is wrong and right is right. And um, seeing things from that point of view will help us to change our behavior, because so many things flow from us as men in our family. It not only affects our wives, but it affects our children. So when we come to the topic of bullyism in school, where does that come from? Where does that start? That is behavior that doesn't start in school.
But so you will have to forgive me, Darian. I will just arrest you. I will just arrest you there, so that we don't dive into the bullyism aspect of it just yet.
Yes, no
Right.
problem. No problem.
But I, but I'm definitely eager to hear your commentaries on those when we get there. Now, Kay, let me bring you into sharp focus. I'm minded that you're really keen on community leadership, and you operate the fellowship under which you serve. Is in one of these quote unquote depressed communities, a community that is characterized by poverty, and these are communities that it's rather commonplace to have all of these social ills. And while poverty is one of the contributors to gender-based violence, I want you to wrap your mind around too in your response. How do we reconcile these relationships with quote unquote affluent or rich people that are characterized by a lot of abuse as well. Oftentimes, those may not make the media. They may not get to the police station. But in these close circles, you hear these discussions. A lot of rich people, a lot of women in these financially secure relationships go through a lot of abuses, physical and otherwise. And we have also this quite unfortunate case with Kenisha Vaughn, who lost her life. And by all appearances, they were a well-to-do couple. Right? How do we reconcile the scourge of poverty with these other instances across the pond?
Uh, I think I'm happy that you went in that direction because as I heard Darwin mentioned it earlier, I thought, so what of these relationships, with the do-gooders or the wealthy, the wealthier couples who still, have these issues? How do we truly reconcile, what the stats are showing when that is concerned? And I think most, if not all of my responses will go back to the mind. Um, because poverty, I believe, is also a mindset issue. And I'm not saying that uh, there are people who are not going to have, there are always going to be people who have more than others. Um, and and I across the board, whether it's dealing with assets or ideas, whatever it is, you can have a, a poverty of mindset. That is a thing, you know? And so I have known couples. I mean, I grew up in a family. I don't believe we were wealthy growing up, but I didn't know that we weren't wealthy because people only sometimes come to an understanding of their circumstances when they are able to compare their circumstances to somebody else. So I do not think that I grew up wealthy. And I've never seen my father be unkind to my mother. My father was never abusive, verbally or otherwise. And there are poor people that I believe that can be kind to each other. And just the same, there are wealthy people who can have that impoverished mindset where they believe that, you know, this is how I'm able to cope or deal with certain issues. And I believe coping mechanisms are also important. Whenever we get to, you know, dealing with those issues, coping mechanisms is something that will have to be addressed because whether you're rich or poor, the issue is here. The issue is always going to be resolved here. And when you have men, like Brother Darwin was talking about toxic masculinity, when you have men who cannot appreciate uh, a variance in perspective in relationships, so that whatever they say has to go, and anything that contravenes that, then it's out the window. And there's that push and pull, especially for women who usually have that intuition, and they can see things differently, and they can see that if he does this, this is what is likely to happen. And so you lend your perspective to the situation, and that is shut down. Then, I mean, you don't get the benefit. I mean, in relationships,
I hope you never have that experience.
you don't get the benefit of another perspective, and you don't get the benefit of the outcome of that perspective if implemented. And so relationships you know exist because people need different ideas. If you were able to do it on your own, then you'd be single. You need help in all different ways in a relationship, whether it's in ideas, it's in carrying the physical load, the mental load, everything. That is why relationships exist, because you believe that you would do better if somebody came along with you. And so when it comes to poverty, like you said, it can be a contributor, but I don't believe it is at the core of the issue. I don't believe that, that is the foundation of the issue, because you cannot have and still be able to, you know, be kind. You can still be able to give direction to your spouse. You can still be able to give direction to your family, and take it from there.
Powerful, powerful, powerful. Uh, we are more than halfway in, and we're still on, gender-based violence. I'm minded that these issues are so layered that it's really difficult to just interrogate them in a short space of time to peel back all of the layers. Now, poverty is, in my humble estimation, is a significant contributor. I know oftentimes we say that, oh, money doesn't solve all of your problems, or money doesn't buy you happiness. Money buys you happiness, and money solves a lot of problems,
I agree.
right?
I
Yeah.
agree.
Yes, it
That
does.
would definitely, that would definitely, prevent you from getting involved in other things, or may perhaps mitigate that mindset which makes you vulnerable, susceptible to get involved in other things. And I always think about I use a classic example of the dilemma of somebody who stands at the crossroad of, survival versus morality.
Mm-hmm.
If you have hungry children and you are standing before a storefront with food and the opportunity presents itself, you can be the most pious person.
Mm-hmm.
You are going to think about your responsibilities, the survival of those children, and that survival may trump morality at that point in time, and you take what you have the opportunity to get. When we're working in these communities, sometimes it's really difficult to go and have a conversation with somebody about changing that mindset, whether it be a poverty mindset, whether it be an abusive mindset. It is difficult to have an impact in those circumstances when people are thinking about bread and butter issues.
Yeah.
Same with politics and politicians, for instance. You're going into communities to talk to people about ideologies, democracy, liberalism, and all of these things. People don't want to hear about those things when they're dealing with bread and butter issues.
Yeah.
And even when we look at the programs that we roll out at church, right, to incorporate the youths in the community into that learning and growth oriented environment, right, you invariably have to ensure that there is refreshment there for them, and that refreshment serve as an incentive for them to come in the first place.
Mm.
So you feed the stomach and then you mold the mind.
Mm-hmm.
Right, we have those same challenges in the communities. Right, so when we look at the scourge of poverty, if perhaps opportunities are opening up where persons can provide for their loved ones, then it takes away from some of that frustration of
Yeah.
not being able to provide. You're perhaps being nagged at, your children are telling you they're hungry, your wife or your girlfriend or what have you is of the view that as the man you're not providing enough, and since that conventional socialization, we don't have any positive outlets for those frustration, then
Yeah.
quite unfortunately we express them in that grave and debilitating way. So if we have these social and economic systems flowing from the government, that cater for the vulnerable in society, then it may
Mm-hmm.
make it considerably easy for us who have that bent on affecting and molding the minds.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of reconciling gender-based violence in impoverished circumstances and in affluent circumstances, right? One of the things I think it speaks about is this male dominating complex and the lack of that constructive outlet for our frustrations, or constructive outlets for our frustrations as men, and I mean even as women, because gender-based violence doesn't flow in one
One
direction. And I know
direction.
those affluent circumstances, women get physical with their partners,
Mm-hmm.
right, Tom? So the approach really has to be a multimodal approach, as Kay has suggested. We have to tackle this on all fronts. And that is where, the contemplation of the stakeholders come in. What can the government and its various ministries do? We have the Ministry of Social Protection, we have the Ministry of Legal Affairs, we have the Ministry of home affairs, all of these different ministries play a pivotal role and would have to take a more hands-on approach in mitigating and ultimately curbing the scourge of domestic violence. And we have the civil society organizations, which, of course, have a responsibility. We have the faith based organizations, which both of you represent, which have a responsibility as well. So, just to wrap up this aspect of our discussion, and this is by no means complete. It's really, really, it's light years away from being complete, in my respectful view, right? But what can some of these stakeholders do in your respective views so that we can get a handle on the scourge of domestic violence, so that our response is not a crisis level response? We're not reactive, we're proactive. We have that really unfortunate incident that this young girl, I think just 15 years old, who was stabbed multiple times, 25 times by her
Mhm.
partner. You're looking at a 15-year-old,
Mhm.
and that deals with so many issues
A child.
because, on the face of it, she's under the age of consent.
A child. Yeah.
We have a lot of young ladies who are teenagers who haven't even reached the age of consent, who have been impregnated, who are being abused in relationships, and so right. So, what can we do from the stakeholders' perspective to get a handle on things?
I guess
So, I will reverse the order, and I will go with K first as we wrap up this segment.
I'll 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 go. As we would have mentioned before, or as you would have mentioned rather, Ronald, that we have to attend to the more immediate needs first, and then we can deal with the molding aspect. And where we are in Caneville, under Apostle Kwame's leadership, I believe that um, we are very well poised in that community, and I believe that we have been able to, do our part where that is concerned. Granted, our approach isn't, to combat violence, but to attend to needs within that community that may, eventually help to root out violence if it is that we're looking at it from the needs perspective in terms of a need for monies or meals or whatever it is. And so we through our ministry have been able to provide uh, hampers and so on within our community to not just members of our church, but we sometimes extend that to other persons, that live within the community. Um, and we are there, and we have been, a group of us have been trained in counseling, and you know, the, as the church, we are there, and I believe that members of the community know that what we have there is a safe haven where they can come and talk about things and find solutions for things. And I believe that every church you know have that opportunity to be that in their community, to be that safe haven in their community, and to be able to provide whatever those communities may have need of. um like I said, our approach have not been ha- our approach has not been specific to gender based violence, but as we were discussing, that if these needs contribute to the violence, then meeting the needs may help to mitigate the violence. And so, I don't know about other churches, but I've been a part of other churches when I lived in Essequibo and so on, and that is something that we have always done as well, to provide hampers for members of the community. I could vividly remember going down the road with my grandmother on Sunday mornings to these little bottom houses where she is dishing out, milk and peas and rice and so on in little bags, and I'm helping her, and we're packing, you know, little hampers for members of the community. So the church is very well poised, I believe, to be able to mitigate the scourge. And of course, we can always do more, you know. Um, but we definitely have been on the right track for some time.
Thank you ever so much, Kay, and kudos to you, kudos to the church for those contributions. Darwin,
Yes. For me, I would like to see there's some things that cannot be legislated in terms of uh, culture and what we what we have been indoctrinized. But I wouldn't use that. What we've been cultured to see as a norm. Um, it starts slow, but then it could escalate into taking a life. What we need to see is more um, of a change in how we as males are socialized, and not only to deal with violence, gender-based violence, but violence in general, in terms of that aggression and so forth. Um, like I said before, is when things get tough, when we're pressured, when we're frustrated, you somehow get back to what to the default setting. And it may not have been that you would have seen that in your home, but you may have seen it a lot in the community, which makes it a norm to you, right? Which makes it a norm to you. So we're very keen on earning and so forth and so forth, but socializing our young men, socializing our young men. We have one of the ministries you didn't call is youth, sports, and culture, which I think could play a pivotal role in young lives. The culture, the pervasive culture, is gyrating and winding up and fetting, right? Which which has its place and its time and so forth. But we need a generation of cultured young men who are socialized to respect women, huh? Who are socialized to respect women. So respect and value women. And coming back to Kay, I think we do life in our ministry there at BAMI. So we have mentors, we have men's fellowship, we have, you know, um, what is it, the youth ministry and so forth. And
Yes.
let me give you something that blew my mind. As you know, the men are assisting in the youth ministry. So we make sure someone is there and so forth. And the week that I attended, I saw this little girl hit this boy who is tall over her. Something he did, and she hit him. So then I separated that. Then there was this other young lady who was, well, not young lady, a little girl and a little boy, and they're exchanging uh, uh, um not pleasantries. They have this exchange, and
Oh.
she says to him, "I'll cuff you in your face, you know." And I'm like,
Mm.
the girl to the boy. And I'm like,
Mm.
and she said, she looked at him, she said, "Hey, we going outside now, you know. So come, we
Mm.
going outside." I'm like
Wow.
thinking,
Wow.
wow, wow.
Yes.
You know, violence is a norm to her, you know. So, and I said, young men, we need to socialize young men, but we need to also socialize young women too. And I think we have mentors and so forth. So we're going in the right direction at the community level, at the faith-based organization level where we're at. Um, wider, wider, we need to have some national strategy
Yes.
toward dealing with these social ills. I think we've prioritized too many other things when we
Mm.
have the means to
Mm.
prioritize our people,
Mm.
right? We have the means to prioritize our people. And I'm talking of things like having social workers in the schools as that. Not only the teachers, but the social workers to deal with the young children and their propensity towards violence as the answer for everything. You know, so that is what I would want to see. And not only the Ministry of Education getting involved, but the Ministry of Youth, Sports, and Culture, so forth, knowing that this thing is such an issue, they have to tackle it multi in a multifaceted manner, in a multi-agency manner, and not
Yes.
just social protection responsible or the police when something happened in terms of home affairs and so forth. And I think all the police should be trained to deal with matters of gender-based violence, not just
Yes.
some, but all.
Yes. With
At the
sensitive.
most basic level, you need to be sensitive to that. But
Yes.
the general outlook is, oh, man, I know my story. When thing done, we go to court and she gonna come and she ain't gonna want to give evidence against him and so forth. Of course,
Yeah.
she's looking at survival because he's the sole breadwinner. She don't know where the next place of food coming from. So she got to wait him. She got to endure.
Mm.
So we need to be very sensitive to these matters because it is life and death, basically life and death. And it may not only affect the partner, but it may affect the family and so forth. Like that case we had last year up the highway, where the guy went and killed
Yes.
everybody that was around.
The Lacruz
Yeah,
family.
all the family and so forth. Yes. So um the issue may not be poverty may be significant, but is the culture and how we are socialized as one learned minister puts it, we have this self-inflated um, value of oneself. You know that we're only concerned about us and our feelings and so forth. And I'm talking about some people that have that propensity. You know, if we can only be more humane,
Yes.
yeah, that would make a major difference
Yeah.
in terms of how we approach problems and ills. That's my contribution, my brother.
Man, that is really powerful. It's so refreshing to hear both of you comment on these issues. I am really stirred. My closing point or points on this issue is that everything rises and falls on leadership and leadership at various levels. I'm reminded that, a fish rots from its head, not from its tail. And we've had, quite unfortunately, in leadership, in governance, we've had significant leaders, ministers, and all of these persons being accused of gender based violence, being
Yeah.
accused of taking advantage of the vulnerable in our society, not only the vulnerable in terms of age, the vulnerable in terms of communities from which they emanate.
Hmm.
And if we're seeing these things as, a normalized prescription at that level, how are we simultaneously from that level combating these issues when they're really two sides of the same coin? And we have this general disposition as a society that, we're comfortable with, an excuse even when the evidence is overwhelming that, oh, I didn't do this. And that just remains in vogue until the next issue captures our attention and
Yeah.
we move on with the characteristic shallow memory that we have.
Hmm.
We excuse these persons, we welcome them back into society.
Yeah.
We don't even expel them to begin with,
Mm.
but we
Yeah.
just, yeah, maybe continue to hold them on a pedestal.
Yeah.
Now, coming a few layers down, I think about that issue recently with these two fellas who stabbed each other over the girl.
Hmm.
Both of them are gone.
Yeah.
I'm minded that one was buried. I'm not sure if the other was buried, but
Mm.
both of them are gone. She is still here.
Yeah.
All right, so we have the two of them dishing out violence to each other as they compete for affections.
Hmm.
And there's no telling that in those circumstances, whether she was treated to doses of violence from either or both of them. And
Yeah.
from their actions, she certainly was, at a bare minimum, she certainly was at the risk of violence from either or both of them.
Hmm.
Now, to pivot on something that you said just now, Darwin, uh, I will use this expression that we can't lead effectively those who we do not love.
Oh
You
yeah.
have to lead from a place of love.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
And
Yes.
if you love those who you lead, you would want to see that their circumstances are better.
Hmm.
You wouldn't want to see that you're getting miles ahead of the vulnerable in society.
Yeah.
So as at the governmental level, you ensure that you're not just legislating. Invariably um, legislation invariably is reactive.
Reactive. Yeah.
It's
Hmm.
hardly ever proactive.
Hmm. Hmm.
And the
Hmm.
proactive approach you take in these circumstances are social, they're economical, they're medical insofar as mental health and so is concerned. You ensure that these communities, these quote unquote depressed communities are adequately resourced. You
Yeah.
ensure that they have effective schools, they have effective infrastructure,
Hmm.
that you're cultivating and socializing productive citizens in these communities.
Yeah.
Right? If persons have to worry about where the next meals are coming from, right? How are we going to be effective parents in those circumstances? We're leaving in those circumstances children to socialize children,
Yeah.
right? So the responsibility of the faith-based organizations in these communities, and I wouldn't even limit it to the churches, because every faith-based organization in any community has a responsibility to contribute to the wholesome development of those communities.
Yeah.
And
Agree.
even though we subscribe to different and various deities, at the minimum human level, we should be able to come up with a policy across faith-based organizations as to how
Hmm.
we are going to help the communities we operate in. I remember Tupac Shakur saying that we're building big churches, taking up blocks and so in these communities, and these churches are not serving the communities.
Yeah.
You need to have these institutions really serve the people who need God.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, and I don't mean to sound as though I'm preaching here, right?
Uh,
The government has its role to play in these
Yeah.
communities. The faith-based organizations have their roles to play in these communities, right? The even like the policing groups and so, right? They are significant stakeholders in the in these communities, right? But we really need leadership at every level so that we can get the type of transformation that we need to mitigate against the harshness, the hardship, the rigors of domestic violence. Now we have another 10 minutes before we wrap up. We're absolutely not going to get to
Yeah.
school school dropouts, but we can
Yeah.
speak briefly. We can speak briefly on bullying in schools, right? Which, as you Darwin was going to point out, is intricately connected with some of the other issues that
Yeah.
we discussed, right?
Hmm.
Rather briefly, I'm minded that the government's response to bullying in school, they have this anti-bullying response app where they treat with reporting, they monitor trends to deal with rapid intervention. Right, the Ministry of Education, they have onboarded what is called the Education Management Information System, right, that is dealing with real-time data management in terms of school operations, attendance, performance, and so. Now, apps are all right. These are tools, but we're not going to fix broken systems and the broken culture with the use of apps.
Yeah.
And we have bullying in schools at the teacher to student level, and we have it at the student to student level. And I'll single out two instances quickly. We would recall in Linden that viral video where we saw the young lady was stabbed in her back with a Rambo knife by another student. You see
Yeah.
very many instances of uh, students ganging up on students, and others are standing by passively videotaping it because everything is trending now. Bullying is trending now. We've had at the social service level, we've seen recently two social service workers drag a young student down the road by her hair.
Hmm.
Oh, we had the other issue in Linden sometime back with the student
By our
who
hand, Ronald.
stuck.
By our hand, not your ear. Our
No, by
hands.
her hair, by her hair, by her
I
hair.
know they were holding on our hair, but they were holding on our hands too.
Yeah, we had another incident in Linden a few short years ago with one
Mhm.
of these students who stutters badly. and other students were making fun of the student, and the teacher even joined in making fun of the student, put the student out of the class, and all kind of thing. Now, I struggled badly with stuttering as a child. I stuttered really badly as a child. Even now, I have difficulties pronouncing certain words. I was taunted for stuttering as a child. And, that has the potential of making that child really insecure. And if the persons who are charged with the responsibility of protecting these students and mitigating against, you know, bullying, is the bullier, or is the bully, sorry, in those circumstances, how are we dealing with those? Right, so I'll just take brief comments from both of you on this as we're nearing that wrap up hour.
Well,
Okay.
I guess I'll go first. Sorry.
No,
um,
sure. Go right ahead, Aaron.
Again, these measures are reactive, and the teachers have a role to play. One of the things, and just let me pivot back, I'm not going to stay too long on it. One of the institutions that we didn't call to be responsible for gender based violence is the family. At the most basic level, the family. These are the persons who are socializing the child. And, I am so happy to the parents in the community who get their kids out to church so that they can have that fellowship, they can have that other influence on them, and they're not just subject to what they see in their homes and outside of the church and so forth. Bullying, an inflated sense of self, again, contributes to that. And sometimes is weakness masquerading as
Yeah.
strength,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Yes.
And the people who were able to meet these kids, the teachers, most of the time they're too busy with their own life. Now, if you have a specialist in the school system, in terms of all these social workers that are these sociology majors that are coming out of the university, if you have about two of them placed in each school to counsel these kids on a daily basis as their sole job, I think it will contribute a lot to mitigating the ill of bullying. It may not eradicate it altogether, but it may contribute a lot to mitigating that issue at the national level, at the level of the school. And the child's, just as we spend most of our hours at work, the child spend most of their hours at school, most of their week hours at school. So I think that is quite necessary.
Thank you ever so much, Darren. So what I'll do, I will just take your closing thought, and I will have Kay comment on the issue and share a closing thought as we wrap up. So I'll give you 30 seconds to treat us to your closing thought.
Yeah. Now, with these issues, they're all intertwined, because gender-based violence perpetuated by the parents, and then you have bullyism, whether in the school or online or so forth. Mostly the kids we're talking about here in school dropouts. We need to address the major ills and not put a band-aid on these problems and be reactive. We need to have some proactive measure, some national strategy to combat these scourge that is quite necessary to serve the people, the human resource of this country, especially the younger ones. I digress.
Thank you ever so much, Darren. Kay, over to you.
Ah, I'm happy that my brother mentioned the family. Um, I knew we were going to get around to it eventually because that is foundation. And sometimes children are bullied at home. Sometimes you have a parent that doesn't allow their children to speak. Sometimes a child trying to say something like, "Mommy, I didn't do this thing," but mommy is insisting that the child did this thing. And so sometimes children learn from home how to be bullies. And as parents, we may not always see that as bullying. We may see it as parenting, and it could be parenting that you would have learned from your own parents as well. And here
Yeah.
we have, the repetition
Cycle.
again of culture.
Cycle.
This is how you grow up, and speak when you're spoken to, answer when you're called, and all of these different things. And so we have to have a shift in our society where um, value is learned from small, from the youngest child. You are valued at home, and so you learn how to value other people when you leave the home. um, I speak to my boys about this all the time because they usually fight among themselves. They fight each other. Um, the older one could sometimes, want to dominate everything, and he wants to have his voice heard above everybody else's. And so I see that in them. And so they're at that stage where they have to be shaped, because I would be embarrassed to send them out, as menace to societies, to
Yeah.
society, God forbid. And so it has to start from the home. We have to cultivate that sort of safety in our homes, where children can say respectfully, what it is that they want to say, and we hear them and we respect their views. And so we teach them, what it is that they need to know in terms of how to be good citizens as they go out. And so the school as well, I've had teachers for bullies, and my own stories that I can talk about where that is concerned, but I'm constrained by time. I've had teachers for bullies, you know. I've had teachers, who told me very mean things, and I
Yeah.
remember those things, you know. And so my my take is that, again, we cannot do this thing, from we cannot fix the issue in one place. We cannot fix it at home alone. We cannot fix it at school alone. We cannot fix it through government organizations alone. There has to be, that community. There has to be that agreement. There has to be that consensus. Everybody has to have the same mind. There must be accord where this is concerned, for in order for it to work. And we may need to take, extreme measures, so that people can fall in line. The law has to be effective. You can't, simply talk to a friend who is a prosecutor or anything like that to absolve yourself of responsibility. And so it has to go from top to bottom and from bottom to top, right? It has to be flowing, you know? And so I would love to see for there to be that relationship between state and citizenry, in combating these issues, gender-based violence and all of these things. I would love to see men holding each other accountable, because I saw this video. I don't know if you all saw it, with this guy chasing the woman on the road. And I mean, he was bold enough to do it around so many people, to be chasing her. I don't know if it is that he had a weapon in his hand and he's trying to hit her with it. And everybody came after him. They all came after him and dealt with him. And that is what community looks like. Our vulnerable in society, they have to be protected, and it has to be a nationwide movement and nationwide effort. We cannot do it in one institution alone. We have to, come together and get it done. And I believe that if we want it badly enough, it can be done. And like my brother was saying earlier, and I echo his sentiments, nationwide strategy. And if year go, year come, we're dealing with the same thing, and we don't, you know, seek a different method, seek different methods of dealing with it, then maybe we are not serious enough where this is concerned. But I believe that it can happen if there is unity, if there's consensus, if there's accord. I believe that it can be done. It may not be totally eradicated, but we can see, it being lowered significantly, and we can enjoy, a better quality of life, and we can get, in the areas of, you know, those northern and eastern European countries who are experiencing, these very high happiness quotients, citizens are
Most
happy.
certainly.
I would love to see that for Guyanese, that we are just happy because the quality of our lives have shifted significantly upward. And it means that all of these things will have to be rectified. Our justice system, our legal system, our health, all of these things will have to be sorted. And it is possible if we want it bad enough. So yeah.
Most certainly. Thank you ever so much for that. Too bad we are constrained by time. This is such a spirited discussion. I really want to thank you, Darwin, for availing yourself. And I really want to thank you as well, Kay, for taking the time. I am certain that our viewers have really benefited from this discourse as we continue to advance the cause. And my major takeaway is that these issues provide an ample opportunity for government and citizens to move beyond the rhetoric and to really participate in mitigating and ultimately eradicating these scourges from our society so that we're not dealing with crisis responses, we're taking a proactive charge towards these issues. Thank you again ever so much, you the viewers. Thank you for tuning in, and we wish all of you a blessed rest of the evening. Love and blessings.
Love and blessings.
Bye.